Welcome to Shift Change, the Idaho Manufacturing Podcast. Over the course of about 20 minutes, we bring you conversations on AI, tech, and the future of Idaho manufacturing. Funding for this program comes from Total Care IT, your Idaho-based IT and cybersecurity partner for manufacturers.
If you're a manufacturing executive here in Idaho, you know your operational security budget is absolutely sacred. You've invested heavily in securing your own environment. I mean, the firewalls, the endpoint detection, all the training for your staff. You've basically built a fortress around your production.
But the reality is the whole threat landscape has just shifted so dramatically. So our mission today is to, synthesize a bunch of recent sources that all point to one critical message. Your biggest security vulnerability is probably not inside that fortress anymore. It's what we call the extended enterprise, your supply chain. It's all the third-party vendors who touch your systems.
And we're not talking about abstract risks here. This deep dive is really for you, whether you're running operations in Boise, maybe specializing in wood and timber, or you're managing food processing plants out near Idaho Falls.
Or metal or agricultural manufacturing, It applies across the board.
Exactly. We know that any downtime is measured in lost contracts and just massive repair bills. So our goal is to give you a kind of roadmap, a shortcut, really, to understanding the immediate steps you need to secure that weak link before it takes you offline.
Right. We have to move beyond just thinking about a perimeter defense. Security is a chain now, and its resilience is really only as strong as its weakest link.
Okay, so let's unpack this.
We're going to break down vendor risk management into 4 key pillars. But first, I think we need to look at a really high-stakes example to see why this is so important.
Let's do it. We should probably rewind to 2020, Operation Warp Speed. I mean, the speed of that COVID vaccine deployment was just unprecedented.
It was a marvel. But behind that speed, our sources show there were cybersecurity professionals working around the clock, fighting to secure this massive, sprawling supply chain that made it all possible.
The stakes just couldn't have been higher.
No. And a lot of the foundational work was done by CISA, that's the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, and a task force advisor named Josh Corman.
He's the founder of IamTheCavalry.org, right?
That's the one. And Corman understood immediately that if the supply chain failed, the entire mission would fail. Simple as that.
So what was the first thing he did? Because I think that's the blueprint for every executive listening.
The immediate, non-negotiable step he took was demanding a detailed, really thorough asset and vendor inventory.
You can't secure the chain if you don't know every single link in it.
Exactly. And what's fascinating here is where he focused his concern. He wasn't, primarily worried about the obvious targets, like the big pharma giants, Pfizer or Moderna.
Why not? They seem like the biggest targets.
Because they had robust, dedicated in-house security teams. He was worried about the unexpected, the peripheral
Well,
player.
small, maybe anonymous companies that were providing some specialized equipment or raw materials.
Yes. The bits and pieces pivotal for vaccines, as one source put it. These are companies that, they probably never in their wildest dreams expected to be the target of a nation-state hacking campaign, but they were absolutely vital.
And that's the real insight for every manufacturer, isn't it?
It is. Corman had to ask a question that, at first, no one could answer. He asked, what are those smaller, less obvious players that, if they're disrupted, means there's no vaccine?
And nobody knew.
Nobody had an answer. And this really defines the concept of tertiary risk, the vendor of your vendor.
Wow. That is a staggering operational gap. I mean, you could have the most secure plant floor in Idaho Falls, but if the small logistics software vendor that handles your scheduling gets compromised,
or the specialty supplier for one unique metal alloy gets shut down,
your whole production line just grinds to a halt. It doesn't matter how good your internal security is.
Exactly right. So the inventory Corman put together, it was dynamic, it was constantly being updated. It identified hundreds of companies across R&D, manufacturing, distribution, all posing risks.
It just proved that one overlooked vendor could have shut the whole thing down.
It could have. And that foundational lesson, know your entire extended network. That's really the starting point for everything else we're going to talk about.
Okay, so that OWS lesson, it shows that a massive inventory is step one. But looking at the numbers now, it's clear manufacturers just can't afford to wait. What are the specific attacks hitting our industry right now?
Well, the manufacturing sector is such a prime target because it's a central choke point. Attackers aren't just after your data anymore. They're looking for operational disruption.
They want to shut you down.
They want to shut you down. And the statistics are, frankly, sobering. In 2023, supply chain cyberattacks in the U.S. impacted almost 2,800 entities.
And that's up from the year before.
It's up a massive 58%. It just shows this attack vector is growing, and it's growing aggressively.
58% is a huge jump. It really validates that attackers have moved their focus outside the firewall.
And the financial hit is immediate and can be devastating. The average cost of a supply chain-related data breach is now over $4 million. And when you think about that in a manufacturing context, that cost comes from so many places. It's downtime, it's production delays that make you violate contracts, it's intellectual property loss, and it's just irreparable damage to your customer relationships.
You mentioned that most manufacturers, they do invest heavily in their own firewalls, but these third-party access points are often overlooked. Just how big is this blind spot?
It's the single greatest source of external risk.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. Every piece of software, every cloud logistics system, every remote diagnostic tool your maintenance contractor uses.
Every key card you give to a service provider.
Right. Each one introduces a new risk profile. One study found that over 60% of organizations had a breach that was directly caused by a third party.
60%. And the scariest part might be the lack of confidence in what happens next.
Precisely. Most companies are not sure if that compromised vendor would even tell them there was a problem in time to react.
So you lose control of your own incident response. You're just waiting for the phone to ring.
Which turns a minor issue into a potential catastrophe.
Okay, so the risk is real. The stakes are incredibly high, especially for essential operations like metal or food manufacturing here in Idaho. The question is, how do we get control? How do we turn this vulnerability into a strength?
It requires a proactive, systematic approach. And it can't just be an IT project. This has to be driven by executive leadership that sets the risk appetite for the whole company. Our sources really distill this down into 4 essential pillars to build resilience.
And I'm guessing we start with that foundational step from Operation Warp Speed.
You got it. Pillar 1 is complete visibility, mapping and inventory. And this goes way beyond just a casual list. You have to build a comprehensive, verifiable roster of every single third-party provider that has any access, physical or digital, to your systems or your data.
So we're talking software vendors, logistics, but also security guards, cleaning services, maintenance, everybody.
Everybody.
Yeah.
And as we just established, just listing your direct vendors is not enough anymore.
Right, because of those tertiary risks.
Exactly. The critical action is to dig deeper. You have to identify the vendors of your vendors. You need to be asking your direct service providers, who are you using to manage my account?
So if my managed IT provider uses a certain remote access tool, that tool's developer is now part of my risk profile.
Precisely. And this list can't be static. It has to be a living document, reviewed at a minimum quarterly.
Okay, but how do we even start tracking vendors of our vendors? I mean, that sounds like a massive undertaking. We're trying to run a manufacturing plant, not an intelligence agency.
It is a resource issue, and that's why you prioritize. You start with your highest risk vendors, the ones with access to your proprietary IP or your SCADA systems, and then you build the requirement to disclose subcontractors directly into your contracts.
Ah, so you shift the burden of that initial mapping onto the vendor themselves.
You do, which flows right into Pillar 2. Once you have this comprehensive tiered list, how do you actually grade the risk they pose?
Right, that's assessment and verification.
Not all access is created equal. You have to classify your vendors into risk tiers based on their access and how critical they are to your operations. A marketing software vendor is a data risk for sure.
But a vendor managing your control systems, that's a critical physical operational risk.
Totally different category. And once you know they're high risk, let's say it's a logistics firm with access to all your scheduling data, what security posture do you demand from them?
You have to demand proof, not just promises.
Yes. Require and verify security certifications. If a vendor is handling your critical information, you should be demanding SOC 2 compliance.
And SOC 2 isn't just a checklist, right?
No, it verifies that their controls, things like security, availability, processing integrity, have actually been operating effectively over time. It gives you assurance that their policies aren't just words on a page. Same with ISO 27001.
But verification is key. If they just hand you a certificate, do you just trust it?
No, you have to go beyond just relying on self-assessments. For your highest risk partners, the ones that could shut down your manufacturing line, you should negotiate the right to request third-party audits or penetration test results.
That brings up a very real-world challenge, though. What if a key supplier, maybe the only source for a critical machine part, just says, no, They won't provide an audit. What leverage do we have if we can't just replace them?
That's the negotiation executives face. And if replacement isn't an option, then the solution shifts from verification to isolation.
Which leads to the other pillars.
It does. You might have to accept their risk, but you do it by imposing your own compensatory controls. We're talking extremely restrictive access, immediate network segmentation, and non-negotiable insurance clauses in the contract to protect you financially.
Excellent point. And that's a perfect segue into Pillar 3, accountability and contracts. This is where you actually enforce the demands.
Correct. You need mandatory controls across all vendor relationships. The baseline, the absolute minimum, has to be multi-factor authentication or MFA for all access points, no exceptions.
And data encryption.
And data encryption, both in transit and at rest. Standard practice.
Okay, but requiring an immediate switch to MFA for all vendors, that sounds great. But for a smaller operation using legacy systems or contractors with older field laptops, that migration is costly, it's disruptive. How do you phase that in?
That's where your risk tiers come in again. High-risk vendors. That's an immediate, mandatory MFA implementation tied to their contract renewal. For lower-risk vendors or systems that can't easily support MFA, you mitigate the risk. You severely limit their access. You use virtual desktops. You use dedicated portals that you control. But the end goal is always universal MFA.
And all of this has to be legally binding.
Oh, absolutely. Vendor contracts must have robust cybersecurity clauses. They need to define data protection expectations, mandatory incident response protocols, and strict breach notification timelines. And you have to live by the principle of least privilege.
Give them only the access they need to do their job, nothing more.
Nothing more, nothing less. And you reevaluate those rights frequently. If a contractor hasn't logged in for 90 days, their access should be automatically revoked.
Which brings us to Pillar 4. This sounds like the strategic defense layer that protects you when all else fails. Zero trust architecture and response.
It is. Zero trust is a huge buzzword, I know.
So what does it mean in a tangible way for a busy executive?
It's essential because it assumes you've already been compromised. The core concept is simple. No user, no system, and certainly no vendor is automatically trusted ever. If they need access, they have to continuously prove their identity and their privilege.
How do you implement that on a practical level on the plant floor, especially with industrial control systems?
Well, strict authentication is part of it, but the most important defense is network segmentation.
You're walling things off.
You're walling things off. You isolate your critical SCADA, or operational technology systems, from the vendor's network access points. So if a vendor's logistics laptop gets hit, the attacker can't just jump from their portal straight to the machine tools on your factory floor. You create digital air gaps.
That requires deep technical expertise, though. Is using a managed security service the only practical way for a mid-sized operation to do this?
For most manufacturers, I'd say yes. Relying only on your internal IT staff for 247 monitoring of all this external vendor access, you're just stretching them past the breaking point. Leveraging a managed IT or security service ensures constant vigilance. It means faster incident response, and you get access to high-level threat intelligence you just couldn't afford to hire in-house. It's about distributing that burden effectively.
And once the defenses are in place, you move to proactive testing.
You have to. You monitor all third-party activity in real time for anything unusual. And our sources really emphasize running drills. You have to test your defenses with simulated supply chain incidents to refine your response plan.
So you know exactly what to do when your key part supplier gets hit, not just when your own email server goes down.
Exactly.
So what does this all mean for you, the Idaho manufacturing executive? The core takeaway here is that a proactive, verified approach to vendor risk management isn't optional anymore. It's a mandatory cost of doing business and protecting your operations.
Right. You have the right to demand proof of security from your vendors. And given the massive increase in attacks and that $4 million average cost, you must demand it.
Plus, there's the insurance angle.
A huge one. Your ability to execute on these 4 pillars, visibility, assessment, accountability, and zero trust. That is going to dictate whether you can even get approved for cyber insurance coverage, which is non-negotiable now.
So if we connect this all back to the bigger picture, that Operation Warp Speed example proved that the weakest link is always the one you can't see.
You may have hundreds of vendors involved in your processes, from raw materials to niche maintenance software.
Given that complexity and the need to protect operations right here in Idaho, I want to leave you with a final thought to start your vendor audit tomorrow.
What single obscure component supplier or maintenance contractor, that tertiary risk we talked about, currently presents the greatest unknown security risk to your specific operations? What are you going to check first on that vendor inventory list to finally secure your extended enterprise?
Thanks for joining us on today's episode of Shift Change. To learn more about how IT can help your manufacturing business invest in future competitiveness, reach out to Total Care IT today.